But I think the world is much better when we are all a little bit weird and we embrace our weirdness. You have some weird stuff too. And if you don't think you do, I'm going to ask your husband what weird things you say and do, and he's going to know. And if you're not sure if you have weird things, go and ask him and see what he says.
Welcome to Little by Little Homeschool Podcast, where you'll learn tips and strategies that will empower you to home educate your children. I'm Leigh Nguyen, a homeschool mom of over 12 years, which includes 2 graduates. When I started homeschooling, I was pretty much on my own and was desperate for encouragement and help. My mission is to be a source of encouragement and help to you. Whether you are just beginning your homeschool journey or you're deep into the homeschool lifestyle, Little by Little Homeschool wants to help you stay the course, because all the time you are investing into your children is completely worth it. If you're ready to take your homeschool to new levels, keep listening.
I had to put the word weirdos in this title, right? We just have to have some fun with ourselves. It is fun when we just poke fun at ourselves as homeschoolers and can laugh and not be super uptight. So let's have some fun with this topic, but I also see that it is a legitimate concern for some homeschool parents. Maybe it is a legitimate concern for you. You might be thinking about homeschooling, or you might actually be homeschooling and it's still a concern for you. Maybe it's not, and this will just kind of help you to feel good about the direction that you're taking. And, we don't want to end up with weirdos in the end, right? Actually, maybe we do. Sit tight. I'll explain that in a little bit more. I had this concern about the socialization because I didn't see any kids that were homeschooled on a regular basis. And so it was just my perception. But I quickly realized that the socialization, it came down to me, but not in a way that added more pressure to my life. I just realized that this doesn't have to be an issue. It comes down to me and my intentionality. And if I'm going to be intentional about it, it doesn't have to be anything that I even think about or worry about. Now, over time, this socialization question, my family, my kids have completely flipped it on its head. And my kids are less awkward in the world than I am. And I'm a public school graduate. That's supposed to be kind of funny. I'm just a bit home more right now, but it's just that season of life that I am, just kind of keeping everything going at home while everybody's out and doing their thing and then coming home, and I'm just like that soft place to land. But really, I say that kind of jokingly. I'm fine out in public, and my kids are really good with being out and about, one-on-one with people, being in groups, being in a leadership position, being in a position of following, and time again, people don't sometimes know that they were homeschooled. And sometimes I find out, they're like, oh, that explains it. And so we just kind of laugh. But so sometimes they do stand out because they're like, wait, you guys are you're a little bit different when they meet just one of them. And then sometimes they'll find out they homeschool, like, yeah, okay, I figured so. But not like in an, oh, I figured so. I figured that out pretty quick just by looking at you. And so they've had lots of fun stories. So let's get into some main thoughts that I have for you so you can take this away and incorporate it and be feeling good about not necessarily having unsocialized weirdos, but really, it might be okay in the end if they are a little unsocialized and they are a little bit weird. Let's first plant ourselves there a little bit with the term of weirdos or being weird. Guess what? There are weirdos everywhere, of all ages and sizes and living in all different places. I personally think we should all be a little bit weird because weirdness makes life interesting. The school's herd mentality makes us want to be the same. Think about the time. I'm going to assume that you have a similar history of schooling as I do, and you went to public school, maybe private school, it's still going to be the same. And it could be homeschool to a degree if you get heavily involved in co-ops. I have seen this firsthand with doing a lot of homeschool activities and with a lot of kids that like the same kids, and they really get to, be around each other, know each other. And it also really depends upon how much those kids are influenced by the world I'm just gonna say that. Depends on these kids. Are they all on TikTok and are they on Instagram? Do they have a lot of public school friends? Then that's going to carry over even into co-ops. Yes, I did just say that out loud. But the school's herd mentality makes us want to be the same. It felt safest in school, right, to be in the group. If you were the weird one, if you didn't wear what everybody was wearing or act like everybody was acting, or you didn't do your hair like everybody did their hair. I went to high school and college in the 90s. So mostly high school then. In the 90s was the early 90s, and we had the poofy bangs and all that stuff. And my mom would never buy the hairspray that I needed in order to maintain my poof all day. And so by the end of the day, my poof was sagging. And so it was a little embarrassing. I thought people would make fun of me, but I guess there's people who had enough not poofs that they got made fun of. But if you didn't fit in with the group, and this can often come down to styles of hair and clothing. And we didn't grow up with a lot of money to be able to buy the name brand jeans. And at the time, it felt devastating to me. And I look back now, I'm like, who cares? I'm like, do they fit good? Do they feel good? Do I feel like they look good? Then I don't care what name brand they have. That's me personally. And my kids feel a little bit, sometimes they go through phases. Anyway, now we're getting off track. But the herd mentality makes us want to be the same. It is safest in the group. It doesn't feel safe to be weird. And oftentimes, homeschool kids are called weird because they don't have that herd mentality where they feel that it's safest and that they have to be just like everybody else. Because the people that they spend most of their time with is their family. And they don't necessarily want to be just like their older brother or their younger brother or older sister, younger sister. They don't necessarily want to be just like their siblings. They want to be themselves. They see the value in being themselves. And therefore, they don't get caught up into that. And we can be called weird because put into a group, they might stand out a little bit because of maybe the way that they look or the way that they act. And it doesn't mean that they act badly or poorly or negatively. They just might act better than the kids around them. And so it's very easy then to say, you're a weirdo. But I think the world is much better when we are all a little bit weird and we embrace our weirdness. You have some weird stuff too. And if you don't think you do, I'm going to ask your husband what weird things you say and do, and he's going to know. And if you're not sure if you have weird things, go and ask him and see what he says. In order to combat this argument of, well, aren't you concerned about socialization? When other people ask you this, and sometimes you can have this argument amongst yourself, just back and forth in your own mind, the term socialized has to be defined. So if someone else is asking you this, well, aren't you worried about socialization? That's typically how they phrase it. Or what are you going to do about socialization? Some type of take on those two questions or a combination of those two questions is how people will phrase it. So if somebody asks you that, I encourage you, this is if you want to engage. It might be somebody, a family member, a close friend, neighbor, somebody that you can't just blow off and you feel like it's better for the relationship for you to engage. Engage well, keep your, words to a minimum and listen more than you speak. But if it's a stranger and you're just exhausted and your kids are just like, we're done for the day, we want to go home, we're at the grocery store, you don't have to necessarily give them a whole long-winded answer. But when you want to engage somebody, ask them exactly what they mean. Say, what do you mean by socialization? What do you mean by being socialized? And then listen. Then reply back and answer in the terms that they used. Use their words back to them when you explain your thoughts about socialization. Okay? They will then accept that. They will hear their words. They will know that you listened. And then when you reply back, you will then be able to break down each of those arguments that they are trying to present to you. Again, you don't always need to explain, but this is if you want to. Ask for the definition of what they're looking for. Sometimes they will say, aren't you worried about socialization? And a lot of the time, the people don't even have a definition for the word socialized. Let's talk about that for a minute. I looked up online through the Merriam-Webster dictionary, and it defines socialization. It says it's a noun. There are two main definitions, okay? Under definition 1, there are, 3 different examples of it. So the first one under number 1 says, so we're going to say 1, then there's A. It says the process beginning during childhood by which individuals acquire the values, habits, and attitudes of a society. Okay, well, that sounds simple enough. So it's just a process of them living and being in the world, right? Then 1B says that socialization is social interaction with others. Okay, well, that's easy enough, right? Take them to the grocery store, take them to church, take them to the baseball field, take them to the park, take them to the playground, all those things. C is now not necessarily talking about people. It now goes into talking about animals. And it says exposure of a young domestic animal, such as a kitten or a puppy, to a variety of people, animals, and situations to minimize fear and aggression and promote friendliness. Sometimes I have heard people say, I don't want to socialize my kids. We socialize our animals. We don't socialize our kids. I'm like, yeah, okay. I can see that as well. The second definition of socialization is the action or process of making something, such as an industry, socialistic. It is a conversion to a collective or governmental ownership and control. Now, I think it's an interesting definition to include in that. That is not what we are going for. And we know that there are some people who are definitely going for that, but I don't think that's the definition that people are thinking about. But I think it's kind of funny when you can point that out to them. That is a part of the definition of socialization. So I think usually people go to these first two, and it is the part of childhood where you are acquiring values, habits, and attitudes of a society. Now, I think it can go beyond this. We talk about during childhood. If you were to move to another country, you would have to begin the process of socialization. In other words, becoming aware of what their values and habits and the attitudes of a society, and how do you kind of fit in and integrate into that. And then the second part of that first part of the definition is social interaction with others. So ask the person, what do you mean by socialized? And then get their answer. Now, that I mentioned earlier that often this can be an internal struggle within us. And so maybe you are concerned about socialization. Again, define it for yourself. Say, I am worried about socialization. I hear this one over and over again. Well, define, what does socialization look like? What does it mean to you for your homeschool children? It's that simple. Sit down, write it down. What does it mean? And just asking yourself that. Then you can say, what does proper socialization or being properly socialized mean to me? Write it down. What do you want them to have exposure to? What do you want to teach them and to show them? How do you want them to be in the world now at this age? And then ultimately, as a young adult, when they step out of your home, how do you want them to walk in the world? Include this concern that you have of socialization into your vision statement. Now, maybe it's not necessarily a concern for you, but I think it's still something good to include in your vision statement. And your homeschool blueprint will help you write out your vision statement if you do not have one. If you don't have a vision statement, you should get one. You should write one out. You should figure that out. And now is a really good time to do that because you have the summer to think on it, to ruminate on it, and to make plans, and you can hit the ground running this next homeschool year, having that in place and being intentional. And so your homeschool blueprint will be a resource to help you walk through that, along with a lot of other things of goals and figuring out your curriculum. Maybe you have your curriculum chosen, and it's going to help you decide whether that is a good curriculum to use, how much of the curriculum to use, because you don't have to use all of it all year long or every single year. But you can get more information at your homeschool blueprint. For your homeschool blueprint at littlebylittlehomeschool.com/blueprint. All these web links in my mind. Okay, I do have some final thoughts about the socialization and the weirdos and all this stuff we're talking about. Is do not squash how God has made each of your children. Some of them might be a little bit more socially awkward, but they are amazing at computer programming, or they are a musical genius, or the meals or the desserts that they can make in the kitchen are just phenomenal. And they just kind of get into that zone and that space. Don't squash that. You might have a child that is very outgoing and you have had to put zero effort into socializing this child. You're kind of like, okay, can we pull back? Can we unsocialize you a little bit here? Don't squash that. That's how God has made them. And it's going to be so cool when you watch them grow up and they become teens and young adults. And I haven't gotten to the adults and the married and the grandkids and stuff like that. But just so far, my mind is just blown. And you wonder when they're younger, what are they going to be like when they get older? You already know. You just haven't seen it yet. It's so fun because you're like, oh, okay, this totally explains all of those years and how you acted. Like, that is how God has made you, how he has wired you. So don't squash that in your children. Yes, there are going to be sinful desires and behaviors, and we do need to work at rooting those out and praying through those and working through those and discipling our kids. But I'm just talking about the things, just the way that he has wired them. Are they gifted in some areas? Don't try to change that. I think you know exactly what I'm talking about and where that line is, but don't squash how God has made them and wired them. And don't try to fit your children into a mold. You might not be a family that is really naturally great at sports. My kids had fun playing sports. We did baseball. They all did, well, my boys did baseball all the way through. And they were never the superstars of the team, but they still went and played every year because they wanted to. And I was like, I'm sorry. Look at your father and I. You had no help from us as far as, like, we're not good at sports. So any type of good at sports that they are of anything, I'm like, that's all completely you. That's how God has made you. So don't try to make them fit into a mold. So if you are not a sports family, don't feel like you have to be a sports family. But if your child wants to do that, then learn. Learn, what does that look like to be a soccer mom for them, and what do the games, learn the rules and all that kind of stuff. But don't try to fit them into a mold that they weren't meant to be fit into. Lean into your family culture. But also don't feel so tied to a family culture that you and your husband have created that you don't look at the children that you actually do have, and that you're like, well, this is our family culture. We don't engage in, say, sports. We don't engage in getting jobs outside the home before you're 18. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up. Don't hold it so tightly. Don't be so legalistic about it. But it's okay to lean into your family culture and then let it morph and let it just organically grow with you and your family. Be intentional in teaching your kids how to behave in various social situations, and they will eventually be fine. You might be working with a young child and you say, this is how we act in church. I had put out a reel on Instagram and then it automatically goes over to Facebook, and there was a lot of questions. It was just some of the things that, and I might do a post, I might do an episode and go a little bit more deeply into it. One of it was that we kept our kids in the service for church. Now, this wasn't necessarily, babies, I had them with me up to a certain age, and I put them in nursery then for a few years, but we had to teach them how to behave in that situation. And we had to have some grace from the people around us, and there was times we had to get up and we had to leave and take one out, but we taught them how to act in a church situation. At sometimes I was like, I don't know if this is going to work. But guess what? They were 22, 20, and 17, and they can sit through a church service, and they're absolutely fine. They know how to act and behave in that situation. They will grow and mature, but it's your job to show them what is proper behavior in different situations. You could be, say, at opposite ends of things, at a wedding and a wedding reception, and there's dancing, and it's just a lot of fun. Well, you can show up. It's okay to have fun and to be a little rowdy and get out on the dance floor with the bride and dance and just have some fun. But then on the other end of that, when you're at a funeral, that is not the time to get up there and start dancing and singing and doing karaoke or anything like that, and showing them in that situation, how do we behave and how do we act? And that a lot of that comes from talking to them before you enter the situation so they know what to expect, talking them through it, and then talking to them afterwards as well, knowing that over time they will mature and they will adjust and they will be fine. Your kids might be weirdos, and that's okay. I'm a weirdo. You're a weirdo. My kids are weirdos. Let's all just embrace a little bit of weirdness and see where God has wired us and put us into the world and to fit into the world, and how we all together just make the world so much more interesting when we just are ourselves. And I promise that your kids will not be, in air quotes, weird, and also in air quotes, unsocialized. They will be fine. If your ears kind of perked up when I talked about your homeschool blueprint, I want to encourage you to go over and check that out at littlebylittlehomeschool.com/blueprint. Would love to be able to see you over there. Get your vision statement written out so that you can feel confident going into the next homeschool year. I'll see you back here real soon on the next episode.
Thank you for listening, friend. I'd love to connect with you more. You can find social media links in the show notes and share this episode with a friend who could use a boost to her homeschool. See you back here real soon.